Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Whatever your time zone, this is Digital Transformation Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we will be discussing the topic of leading the rollout of AI tools across your organization. Now, leading AI rollout involves several critical factors to ensure successful adoption and integration. There are indeed too many to include in my intro, but I'm going to try to talk about just quickly a few of the key factors to consider, starting with strategic alignment. Now, this is a topic that we have covered extensively on this show in recent months. The critical need to align AI and digital transformation initiatives across with the organization's strategic objectives. A lack of alignment is found to be the top reason for digital transformation failure, and those failure rates can be 70% or more. So it's important to have a clear vision and a roadmap for AI adoption that is linked tightly with business goals, the business goals of your organization. Now, this, of course, requires stakeholder engagement. Strong executive sponsorship and engagement is absolutely necessary, as is cross-functional collaboration from various departments, including IT and HR and finance. Otherwise, the likelihood of failure goes way up. Change management is also critical, a topic that we explored just last week on this show. This includes the need for a robust communications plan, training programs to upskill employees, and a cultural readiness for change and openness to innovation. And let's not forget the technology and the infrastructure that's needed, data strategies to ensure access to high quality data, and a governance framework to maintain data integrity and privacy and security. Scalability with scalable AI solutions that can grow with your needs, and integration with existing systems to make the most of your infrastructure and your efforts. There's a bunch to consider. There are other factors that I simply don't have time to talk about in any detail. Things like measurements and evaluations and the right KPIs and the right metrics, resource allocation and talent acquisition, and risk management and the ethical and regulatory considerations. It all boils down to a whole lot to think about. But considering these factors, organizations can effectively lead the rollout of AI tools effectively. But how do you do it? Well, that's what we're here today to talk about with a great panel of guests. But before I introduce our guests, I do want to say that we want to hear from you too. I'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way, jump on in. I will attempt to get some of your questions into the flow of the show today. And we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, with all of that said, let's bring aboard our panel of guests today, starting with Brian Phillips. Brian is a senior manager with TELUS International. Welcome back to the show, Brian. Where are you calling in from today?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I'm calling in from Austin, Texas right now, which is a little bit outside of my comfort zone in terms of my location, but normally I'm just outside of Toronto.
All right, very good. Well, welcome aboard from Austin, Texas today. Thank you for being here. Also joining us, first time on the show, is Pat McGrew, Managing Director at the McGrew Group. Pat, welcome aboard. Are you with us?
Hey, Kevin, I am here and delighted.
Where are you calling in from today, Pat?
So, Kevin, I am just a little bit east of Denver, Colorado today.
Denver, Colorado. Oh, yes, very good. Well, welcome aboard, Pat. Thank you for being with us today. And also Ron Gerlach, Chief Marketing Officer at Gobert Oil Company. Ron, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from today?
Oh, thanks, Kevin. I'm down here in the hot and sweltering New Orleans region.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, the United States well represented today. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. Look, I'd like to start our discussion by bringing up an article published recently from Indian Express that talks about how Apple is poised to reveal its generative AI strategy for iPhones. And indeed, just yesterday, Apple announced at the Worldwide Developers Conference that they will be launching generative AI across iPhone-specific applications like Siri and iMessage to its massive install base of over 2 million iOS devices. The emphasis will be on building trust with consumers with the use of AI, with the aim that the approach could be a differentiating factor that Apple might leverage to avoid the pitfalls that Google and others have encountered recently by deploying AI perhaps haphazardly. This is important because in recent months, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft have all been in the headlines for the wrong reasons. First, Google had to roll back its AI overviews search tool after a new feature produced inaccurate and odd results. Then OpenAI got some flack for introducing a voice for ChatGPT that sounded very much like Hollywood actress Scarlett Johansson. Look, all of these are indicators of the urgency in the larger AI landscape and the fear of not keeping up. So I'd like to ask the panel today for your opinion on the article and Apple's plans. Will they get it right and avoid the missteps of Google and Microsoft, or are we simply moving too fast with the adoption of AI? Pat, I'd like to start with you. What are your thoughts on the article, and are we simply moving too fast?
You know, Kevin, I don't think we're moving too fast. I think there's always a level of caution that we want to exercise whenever we deploy a new technology. But to be honest, this technology is not all that new. We're just learning new ways to use it. And I think that if I read through everything that was flying through after the WWDC announcements, it's pretty clear that this has been in the works for some time. But as with any new technology, it takes a little bit of time to figure out what the holes are going to be in the strategy. Best laid plans often don't survive the first battle. And I think that when we start to look at how Apple is saying they're going to deploy it, there's a certain measured cadence to it. I like the fact that they have talked about these AI tools as being native to the iPhone and to the iOS applications. I think that that's going to provide a lot of value. You know, Apple's not the only one out there doing it. If I kind of look at the last 2 weeks of my life, I've been at a trade show for the last 2 weeks where there was not a product that I saw in 18 halls of printing technology that didn't have some sort of GPT component or other AI or machine learning component to it. I think that as we watch what we're seeing Apple roll out, they're going to trip, they're going to fall, they're going to annoy the heck out of us as users for a little while. But over the next few years, I expect that our experiences will only get better. Enterprises are going to have to be careful, though, because remember, that means that all your employees who have an iPhone in their pocket, or for that matter, anybody else's phone in their pocket, have access to AI, and you're going to need policies for it.
Well, I saw in the news just today that Elon Musk is threatening to ask or have his employees come to work without their phones or not have their phones or iPads with them. Now, Ron, I know you are following the developments in the AI landscape very closely. What are your opinions about the article and Apple's plans for rollout?
Well, I would agree with everything that Pat is saying, but there's really two things. It's funny that you brought up Musk at the very end, because I would suspect that there's a portion of that. Musk is getting ready to come out with his own generative AI. I believe it's XAI pretty soon. So this might be a little bit more marketing on his side than anything else. I think the biggest issue could very well be perception in this, because Apple is very well known for privacy protection. That's one of the areas that they really hang their hat on with this. And because they've partnered with not only OpenAI, but now they're also saying that low-level AI tasks, which I suspect are going to be the primary uses for most people on an Apple device, low-level AI tasks will take place directly. They'll be native, but they are going to have to use cloud servers for the more intensive AI tasks, and that opens them up for potential privacy issues and problems that that Apple users pride themselves in saying ours is the most um, privacy-laden product, and that's really why we go toward Apple. So it'll be interesting how that works out and how Apple addresses any potential problems down the road.
Well, one thing I will tell you is that when AI is ubiquitous on all iPhones, and it looks like we're heading that way shortly, that I think will be a tipping point or a critical mass point where AI starts becoming a part of our everyday lives. I remember when there were no iPhones. Now I can't live without it. I remember when there was no AI, and now perhaps with it ubiquitously on my iPhone, I may not really be living without it.
Kevin,
so in a few years,
Kevin,
we may
if
find
we're honest, Kevin, it's been there for years. We just didn't know it.
Well, that's right. But I think that it's in our consciousness and how we use it. Now, as you mentioned, Pat, you were at a trade show for the printing industry, and everywhere you went, AI was part of the discussion, whether that's valid or not. I'm wondering, will we enter a time in just the next few months or a couple of years or even less, where AI becomes ubiquitous in our everyday lives and we use it as easily as we use, say, a search engine like Google for simply just searching something? Will we be entering an era where it's ubiquitous to our lives? Brian, what are your thoughts on all of this and Apple's recent announcement?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kevin. I mean, seriously, it takes the Apples of the world or the Googles of the world, even Android for that matter, which we haven't really discussed at this point, and they're going to come out with something as well here in the next week or so to, get up on top of the release that Apple just announced. But what's unique about all of this is, to everyone's point here, it's going to be something that we just seamlessly adopt. And the fact that Apple is, I won't say first, but they're here. We got Elon Musk, who's, releasing press against an Apple release. That's in Apple's wheelhouse, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of getting more publicity out there. But in terms of, using the adoption of voice with Siri and voice with other generative AI platforms, whether it's Gemini, whether it's OpenAI, ChatGPT, doesn't really matter at this point, because as Pat mentioned, it's been there and we've been using it or not using it, but it's been front and center for a couple of years now.
Well, all right. We will see how all of this rolls out. For folks that would like to reference that article, it is here in the chat feature. Apple's rollout of AI will matter more than those features actually are. So check it out. Let us know what you think about that article. We'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the Apple rollout? What are your thoughts on the potentially ubiquitous nature of Apple's AI tools on our iPhones now? But folks, I'd like to move us into the body of our discussion today, and that is talking about leading the rollout of AI tools across your organization. And it starts with identifying both the opportunities and the risks of widespread AI adoption. First of all, when it comes to enterprise organizations, Pat, you mentioned that enterprises need to be wary and aware. When it comes to enterprise adoption of AI, from your perspective, what are the big risks of AI adoption, and what should we be doing about it?
I think we have to recognize that AI is not always AI in terms of how employees might engage with it. It's also how your engineers engage with it. It's how your developers, your architects, everyone who are leading the products and services that your enterprise may be involved in have a use for and potentially are already using AI-based tools to help them do their job. And that's why I brought up the idea of policies, because these tools can be fabulous and they can help you fast path your entry into the market. But if you haven't, ahead of the wave, set some policies for how to use AI tools, what's ethical, what's not, what's acceptable to the enterprise and what's not, it can take you over and it can lead you down a path to litigation you may not be prepared for. So as I was walking around talking to a lot of the large hardware vendors in the print industry over the last 2 weeks, but also the large software vendors in the industry, AI was a topic because they're already using it. Their engineering teams have already been using it, and they just hadn't actually exposed their use to their end customer. They didn't feel a need to. But as the talk around ChatGPT exploded, they realized, many of them realized, that they did not have internal policies around how to use the tools. So that's going to be a big push for them to get done, certainly as fast as they can. But when you're dealing with giant multinational enterprises, it's also a legal challenge to develop the policies. European law is quite different than U.S. law, Canadian law, laws in across Asia, in Australia, across South America. So, in order to do it right, it's a conversation with senior executive leadership, the legal advising team, the development management, as well as those who advocate for the customers of any product or service to figure out how to go forward. For me, I'm delighted. I was looking at giant printing equipment that had AI embedded in it to make it easier to operate complex equipment so that we didn't have to worry about, that's maybe not the right phrase, that we could ameliorate the issues around labor shortages around the world by making the machines a bit smarter about the tasks that they were designed to perform without needing someone with 40 years experience setting, ink on a high-speed gravure press or offset press or even a digital press. So for me, policies and collaboration within the organization are going to be key.
Absolutely. I think it's not the technology, it's the policies that can trip us up, or lack of policies. Certainly there should have been a policy to not use Scarlett Johansson's voice when she did
and
not
they say
approve
they
of her voice
didn't.
being used.
Right? They issued a press release that said they didn't, but darn, it sounds like her.
Well, we'll find out, won't we? All right. Now, Ron, I'd like to move to you, Ron. Ron, we're not sure whether you are even with us because your image is frozen. Ron, can you refresh your browser if you can hear me so we can get you on back on board again? Ah, there you are. I see you moving around. Okay, very good. Well, Ron, we've been talking about, Pat mentioned the guidelines for AI are different from country to country. And I know you've been watching developments in the UK very closely with the new AI Act. Tell me a little bit more about that and how it relates to identifying the risks of widespread adoption, especially for our listeners and viewers in the UK.
Well, the AI Act came about. I guess it actually came into being like about a month ago. It's really the first ever kind of legal framework around AI, and it's really trying to address the risks of AI and positions Europe play in leading in that role globally. They're trying to develop clear requirements and obligations on how to use regarding specific uses for AI, and what they've in kind of a 60,000 foot level, really what they've done is taken a risk-based approach to this. So you're going to have unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. And each one of these risks has a certain criteria that companies have to fulfill, or risk some pretty heavy fines. Upwards of, I believe the fines are somewhere around $38 million, or 7% of the company's revenue for the year. The act itself is, to me, there are some holes in the act. In other words, each country can set up their own governing body as to how they assess the risk and take a look at issues that come up. But the bottom line is there's really no major company out there that is not doing or going to do business in Europe. So they're going to have to start either following the Act's guidelines or setting out their own guidelines that are probably going to end up looking very similar to what the AI Act has put in place.
All right. All right, Ron, very good. Anna, our producer, is telling us that you are still frozen on your image. We can hear you fine, but you are frozen. So if you could refresh your browser, Ron, we'd love to have you back active with us
Sure.
on the camera as well. All right, now we have a question coming in from Dominic. Dominic, thank you for your question, and I'd like to direct this over to Brian, if I could, Brian. Dominic is asking, what are the potential risks of data breaches involving AI systems, and who is accountable for those, for the actions and outcomes of AI systems, especially in cases of data breaches? Brian, can you give us some advice on that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to the data and the ownership of the data, I mean, the access to that, whether it's using AI or not using AI, becomes a potential risk factor. And we've seen, every day, I think there's a stat that says every 30 something seconds, there's a potential data risk breach globally, which is like astronomically high if you think about it, with all of the information that's out there for people to grab and use in a malicious way. And so when you add in a layer of vulnerability like AI, as soon as you put that into an open environment, you're at risk. And so going back to the conversation around the policies and the framework, if I just touch on a little bit of what Ron was saying, in my opinion, what the AI Act in the UK is really just a framework for people to kind of get that conversation started, and it'll evolve here in the days and weeks, probably even hours, to get very buttoned up and very precise in how that is going to affect the day-to-day use of data across the globe. But more importantly, as we talk about the openness of AI and how it's interacting with all of the devices that we're touching, whether it's your iPad or your laptop or your cell phone, we all have to be cautious that what we're saying, what we're doing is open for that attack, and we have to be careful. And those policies and whatnot that the companies that we either work for or that we're interacting with have to have that framework in place to help protect that critical information so that it doesn't leak.
And who is accountable? We have a data breach involving our AI systems. Who's accountable for that?
In my opinion, it's going to be the person that is allowing that access, right? So it comes right back down to whether it's you as a company that has that AI capability turned on. You have to have you will ultimately be held accountable for that, and because if you think about this, so you can open the AI or the open AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever system you're using at this point. It's going to be vulnerable to whichever access you're giving. So if it's inside an enterprise cloud environment where you have those controls, obviously it'll be a lot tighter from a security standpoint. But if it's open and it's the wild, wild west, and you're allowing that, you ultimately will be responsible for that.
All right.
As a company.
All right. Look, I want to move on to our next discussion point, but I do want to ask this question. We talked about the risks of AI adoption, and we could talk all day about, I guess, that. But what are the opportunities that are really present for normal organizations today, everyday enterprises, I don't know, selling shoes or whatever we may do? What are the real opportunities for AI? Is this really still just sort of a hype cycle, or are there real world opportunities for AI? And if so, what are they, and where do they make a difference? Let's do this very quickly. I'll just open it up to all three of you. What are the opportunities we should be considering? Anyone?
Well,
it's huge. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pat.
It's a free for all.
One of the things,
Pat, please go ahead.
Things that jump. Kevin and guys, one of the things that jumped out at me over the last couple of weeks of kind of being immersed with a lot of people is that the real value proposition is speed and the ability to do iterative failure testing faster than we've ever done it before, to have our attempts to create new communication, new products and new services, the ability to do those testing cycles faster than we've ever done before, with better metrics and better data than ever before. So one company I was talking to is leveraging a GPT engine in order to test outbound communication to different cohorts to make sure that it's at the appropriate grade level and sentience level, so that they can be better assured that it'll be understood. This is in financial services. Alternatively, in a training context, the ability to create training materials either at the academic level or at the manufacturing level to ensure that the recipient of that new tractor or that new crane, no pun intended, or that new device is able to use it based on their level of understanding. So there's so many ways to use these tools. It's absolutely brilliant. We just have to be kind of smart about where we're pointing our engines in terms of large language models and multimodal models to make sure we're not exposing things out into the ether that we don't want exposed.
Yeah.
Where are the impacts? Go ahead, Ron.
Well, no, I would just, Pat's spot on with this. I mean, the risk reward of what the opportunities are is really why everyone is willing to, for lack of a better way of putting it, take that gamble. I mean, the increased efficiency and productivity, the enhanced customer service, the ability to open up new avenues of innovation, reduce labor cost, predictive analysis for marketing strategies. I mean, those are all the opportunities that we're all willing to put up with almost any kind of negative risk in the short term, to be able to get those opportunities. And keep in mind, AI right now is the worst that it's ever going to be. It only gets better from here.
So I'm still struggling a little bit, though, with this idea of adoption of AI really benefiting my organization. Maybe I'm just not seeing something, but the only thing that I can really see is a reduction in effort. And that means a reduction in workforce and saving money on the actual people costs of the organization. Where are the opportunities for me to actually gain more revenue and reach better market share using AI? Taking the reduction of workforce out of the equation. Help me understand the real opportunities. Anyone? Brian, do you have a thought on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we haven't talked about, and this is, I'm loving this segue, by the way, is AI is the most powerful behind the scenes. So taking that data, the voice of the customer, the context, the sentiment, the empathy that is either said or not said within that transaction, if you're thinking about this from a point of sale or from a website visit or a customer service exposure, AI, in my opinion, is not going to replace the person. It's going to allow that person or that human to actually do more and be more effective. So we're not there yet, in my opinion, with having AI completely take over your conversation. AI voice is still not there. It is very, very early stages for that. But using AI behind the scenes to assess the data, to pull those reports, to get that insight that we're not able to do without, deploying, multiple people to different databases and understand what exactly is going on. That's where AI, in my opinion, just drives home that ability to understand what's going on in real time. So if I'm working in an environment where knowing what exactly the customer is saying, let's say it's an outbound sales program or something where I'm trying to upsell or cross-sell, but I'm using AI to understand, another avenue of what the customer's trying to say, or what we believe is their real problem or real pain point, we can use AI in a very ethical way to say, you know what, I think he wants this, or I think he's trying to do this. And by the way, the last time you talked to this person, or this person contacted your company, they had these conversations, they had these insights, and presenting that information real time to somebody to have that ability to address that concern, make that call real, make that call warm, make that interaction personable. That's where AI really, again, in my opinion, really can pull through the experience of making that pleasant, regardless of the reason why they're contacting you.
Yeah, and we use it in exactly that way with our sales staff right now. That's why whenever I have conversations about AI with other senior levels, I always remind them that it's, in my mind, it's really not that AI is going to replace jobs. What AI is going to do is going to replace people that don't know how to use AI to do a better job. And what Brian said is really one of the key areas that we use it in our company. Use it to understand and even predict what the customer's pain points are, what keeps them up at night. Be able to construct that conversation with the help of AI. So when you go in and have that conversation with the customer, you're already talking the customer's language. And you're talking in a way that they completely understand and feel like you are now a partner with them in business and not just a vendor to them. And AI is very helpful and has made dramatic changes in that, especially from the sales standpoint.
Think
So it's
about also
about
the healthcare
enhancing.
industry. Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Go ahead,
But think
Pat.
about the healthcare industry, where very often very overwrought, overworked staff members are trying to explain medical concepts to people for whom maybe English isn't their first language, or maybe it is their first language, but they're not medical experts. And now all of a sudden they have to understand how to live with diabetes, how to live with other medical conditions. AI can help you do that. And in fact, in some of the very largest very well-known healthcare brands, they're already deploying AI-based communication methods to help their staff communicate at the right level to the people they're trying to help. That's such a huge benefit.
Yeah,
All right,
and
very good.
Kevin, if I can just add really quickly here.
Please, Brian.
So think about this, right? So we're in North America. I'll say, I think I can say this in North America. There's a bit of a housing crisis where affordable housing is not available, and there are certain mechanisms in place right now where the governments are trying to allow for multi-tenancy and changing your existing home into somewhat of a condo or apartment split or whatever. So to do that, you have to interact with the building permit and the building guides and things like that. And one use case that we've been working with a lot here with one of the Canadian government entities is, understanding that building code. You literally have to be an engineer to understand how to figure that stuff out. And so what we've done personally here, with my organization, is we've deployed AI within that framework of the building code to say certain things in layman's terms, if I will, right? So understanding, I'm just a homeowner that wants to, piece off a part of my property and to help with this housing crisis, but yet the permitting process is 18, 19 months out. And so AI is being infused into this process to not only understand the building code in generic layman's terms for people who don't have engineering degrees, to also then push forward the process to get everything in line and stay compliant within that process. So when applied properly, we can address a lot of these, real now problems within our global footprint. And that's where I think AI should be really focused, is problem-based, right? I mean, everybody can say, I have Siri on my phone, or I have Siri I got Google Nest, I got, all these voice-activated devices. But are they really solving world problems? No, they're not. But when you actually have a use case that's going to address the concerns where AI can actually make a difference, that's where I feel, the Apples of the world and the Googles and ChatGPT and everybody else that's designing all these LLMs, they need to start thinking about what is real and what really makes a difference, not the end consumer or the shiny new toy, but how can we make a difference using AI? Once you establish that, then you'll get the adoption.
All right, we are here today with Brian Phillips, Senior Manager at TELUS International, Pat McGrew, Managing Director at the McGrew Group, and Ron Gerlach, Chief Marketing Officer at GoBear Oil. We're talking about leading the rollout of AI tools across your organization. We'd like to hear from you too. If you have a question or a comment for the panel, please jump into the chat feature. I want to know, are you folks using AI in your organizations? And if so, how are you using it to capture opportunity for organizational performance and the betterment of your organizational mission? So please jump in with your comments today in the few minutes that we have left. Now, folks, I have let us go a bit astray. I'd like to get us into our next discussion point in the few short minutes that we have remaining, and that is best practices for integrating AI tools across the organization. As I mentioned in my introduction, there is a ton of stuff to think about and consider. From your point of view, what are the biggest opportunities for, the biggest opportunities for AI, and what are the best practices that we should be using to adopt tools effectively across our organization? Pat, do you have some best practices that you would like for us to consider today?
I do, Kevin, and actually you sort of teased it in your opening when you talked about that executive buy-in, because we know that projects fail when we don't have executive buy-in, right? We have to go find those people in our organization who are going to be our champions. But if without executive buy-in, we're just not going to make it anywhere. We're going to find that we have funding deficiencies. We're going to find that people don't take it seriously. But beyond that, I think that one of the most important things that you can do is start looking for those repetitive tasks in the organization that people hate to do. And if you can take those repetitive tasks off their table, you can grow a more valuable employee in your organization. People typically only change jobs if they get annoyed, right? They're not making enough money. They're being asked to do things they don't like to do. They're not being given enough flexibility. If you talk to the newer upcoming generations, they want to feel valued. And nobody feels valued if they're pulling staples out of a pile of paper, right? Nobody feels valued if they're asked to read a piece of paper and type stuff into another field on a screen. Those are all things that can be, maybe the pulling the staples out of the paper might require a robot that's AI enabled, but nevertheless, all the other things we can often do that are very repetitive tasks, especially in office settings. That's where AI can help really change the nature and the culture of an organization. And I've seen it happen. And it's really amazing when you have the right buy-in and the right strategic, to come back to your opening, the right strategy in place to evaluate what tasks are the low-hanging fruit that we know will get everybody excited enough to live through the harder things in later deployments.
Well, what happens to the people that are displaced? I mean, so we take all the staple removing out of the, we take all our staff of people that were removing the proverbial staples. Then what happens with them?
But very often they're not displaced. Very often what they are is redeployed, because every business we talk to in our practice tells us that they have labor shortages, but they can't afford to take people off the repetitive task to train them into the more valuable tasks, because they still need those repetitive tasks done. Well, if we can take those repetitive tasks off the table, those people can be redeployed, and very often they are.
Well, can anyone give me an example of one organization that has done just that, used AI to automate a process, displaced, say, a batch of people, and then reskilled them and redeployed them? Can anyone give me a real world case example of that actually happening?
Yeah, Kevin.
Most of the banks in Canada.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Kevin,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, so it's all good, Pat. So in our organization, to be completely transparent, 5 years ago, we started with one automation, and we are now, upwards of 300 plus automation digital coworkers is what we call them. And some of the features and functionalities of those digital coworkers were actual jobs or processes or workflows that people were actually doing on a daily basis. And what's unique about this is we've then taken those same resources, those same individuals who are aspirational and want to do more with their careers, and we now have them managing the automation. So we've reskilled them, we've retooled them, trained them, because not only did they wanted to do more, they wanted to learn more. They went to school to do something other than, pulling staples out of a piece of paper, if you will. And so leveraging that brain power that they have to actually drive and build the automation roadmaps that are, effectively being deployed today. We've done that with almost 250-ish resources, and we started with zero.
And Brian, is that a policy that is part of the executive suite's decision on how they will run? In other words, is that an executive policy that has been cogently put forward intentionally in terms of building a culture of reskilling and redeployment?
Yeah, 100%. And our C-level executives understand that, there is, attrition within the ecosystems, and sometimes naturally and sometimes, organically. Right. And then we move on from there, right?
All right, very good. Now, look, I am cognizant that we are running short of time. I want to move on to our third topic, and that has been the idea of responsible and ethical AI governance and what that looks like. And why I'm thinking this is that we have another question coming in from our audience today. This one from Harold. Thank you, Harold, for your question. Harold is asking, what are the key components of an effective ethical AI governance policy? And how can organizations ensure compliance with these guidelines while fostering innovation and maintaining public trust? That's a big question, Harold. Thank you for that. I'll put this out to Ron, because I want to get to you, Ron, but please, everyone jump in. What are the components of an ethical AI governance policy? And how can we foster that sort of culture throughout the organization? Ron, do you have some thoughts for Harold today?
Sure. I think certainly you want it to be transparent. You want to have accountability for it. You want to make sure that your AI decisions are explained and justified. You want to protect from bias, and you want to protect for bias and fairness. You want to regularly audit the AI systems for any kind of bias. Use diverse data sets to train the AI models, adhere to data protection regulations, certainly implement strong cybersecurity measures. And you also probably, it's pretty important, I think, you want to have kind of a human in the loop oversight on this, especially for critical decisions. Make sure that there is human judgment involved in the process and not just try to replace human judgment with the AI tools.
All right, very good. All right, well, thank you, Harold, for that question. Now, look, folks, we are running short of time. I want to thank Ron Gerlach, Pat McGrew, and Brian Phillips for being with us today. Folks, I'm wondering if you could please provide us with one quick action item that our audience can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice today. So I'd like to start with you, Brian. Do you have an action item for us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, excuse me. I'm thinking when you're putting the framework together, whether it's, fail fast methodology or agile or whatever you're thinking here from a design, build, and deliver, be accountable. If you assign accountability to whatever layer of your AI business practices, you will get the folks showing up to own and manage those outcomes. And everything that Ron just said, whether it's, reliability, security, vulnerability of that platform, make sure that the people that are involved are accountable.
That is Brian Phillips with TELUS International. Brian, thanks a lot for being with us again today. Next up, I would like to ask Ron Gerlach, do you have an action item for us today, Ron?
Sure. Yeah, I would action item wise is have a clear strategy to begin with. Um, Involve your employees in the process, and monitor. Always monitor continuously.
That is Ron Gerlach with Gobert Oil Company. Ron, thanks again for being with us on the show today. And finally, Pat McGrew. Pat, what is your action item for us today?
I want you to walk your business and do a true assessment of where you already have AI and where it would be beneficial. Very often, businesses set out on the strategic path without actually identifying where they already are. They don't know their baseline. So, I want you to do an assessment of where your business really is, understand what tools your teams are already using that have AI in them, whether you realized it or not, and build that policy that says how it is acceptable and how it is not acceptable use. And then I will camp on to Brian and Ron, because that for me is the trifecta of the best approach.
That is Pat McGrew with the McGrew Group. Pat, thank you so much for joining us today. Brian, Pat, and Ron, it's been great speaking with you today. What a great panel. Your perspectives and advice were spot on. Thank you so much. I hope that we'll get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you too. Join us again next week on June 18th with another great panel of guests when we will be discussing the topic of how your transformation strategy will deliver a competitive advantage. That should be another great discussion. So join us then. And in the meantime, if you'd like to find me, you can do so. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. So check me out. I'm Kevin Crane. And you can check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. And until next time, I'm Kevin Crane. Thanks for watching.